old way. It is good to see everyone this morning. If you would like to follow along with the scriptures we're going to be looking at this morning, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. We'll be starting around about verse 17. Matthew chapter 5. And we'll start looking at some scriptures around verse 17 this morning. I know that the congregation has just finished a rather long study of the book of Matthew. It's a good study. Hopefully this morning we'll be able to focus on some things that are a little bit more detailed and take a closer look. Years and years ago, I taught a class in this auditorium, filling in. It was about the Beatitudes. And I thought, well, great, I'll do the Beatitudes. And I thought, well, I know for a fact there are going to be some folks there who remember the last class that I did, and I just don't want to do that to them. I'm not going to make them sit through it twice. So this is a class that I have not taught here. And I think that it will be very beneficial for us to take a look at God's Word. We have in Matthew chapter 5, when it comes to events going on in Matthew chapter 5, what has begun in this scenario? What is Jesus doing? Jesus is preaching to the crowd. This is the very famous first sermon that Jesus ever preached. This is in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus has been doing some miracles. Jesus has been traveling. People have been following Him. And this is in the Sermon on the Mount where the people followed Him out into the wilderness. And Jesus got to a place where He could sit down and be kind of elevated from the people. And He just began teaching them. What is the main overarching topic of the Sermon on the Mount? One word that we're really looking for, and if we don't know right off, we'll start looking at specific sections and you'll see it pretty quickly. What do you think? What is the main topic of the Sermon on the Mount? Okay. Obey the law, prepare for the end, is hunting around the edges of it a little bit. Well, the Beatitudes are a huge clue. Beatitudes were the very first part of the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus began with the Beatitudes talking about this word. What is the word that every Beatitude has in it? Blessed or blessed, if we want to get King Jamesy on it, that's okay. We can pronounce it in the old way, but that word blessed or blessed, it means, when you really study it, it means that which is approved of God. Blessed, approved of God. We have the section of the Beatitudes. We have salt and light. And there's a big contrast in the salt and light section immediately after the Beatitudes, where Jesus talks about how His followers behave as versus the worldly folks behave. And there's a contrast there. In the section we're studying today, we have contrast. You've heard it was said, but I say to you. The thing that all of these sections have in common is righteousness. Jesus is instructing in righteousness. The Beatitudes, that which is approved of God. This is the behavior you need to have God's approval. If God approves of your behavior, you are most certainly righteous. If we're going to be salt and light, we're going to be practicing righteousness in a world that's not used to that. This section, these contrasts, you've heard it was said, but I say to you, is an instruction in further righteousness. And that's where we're going to be today, beginning in verse 17. We're going to start taking a look at this. Now, Jesus makes an interesting statement beginning in Matthew 5:17. Who can read that for us? Matthew 5:17. Go ahead. Just verse 17.
Think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill.
Okay. Why would Jesus be talking about this? We just discussed the last sections of this segment. We've got the Beatitudes, we've got salt and light. Anywhere in there, has Jesus talked about the law and the prophets? Has He talked about destroying the law or the prophets? Has He brought that up at all? There's not any evidence of that. Jesus hasn't done that yet. So why is Jesus bringing it up now? I'm about to. That's what I'm getting ready to. Don't think I came to abolish the law or the prophets. He's bringing that up because of what He's about to say. Does it make you want to keep reading, keep studying? Oh man, Jesus is about to get into something. Well, do not think I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. Well, there are a couple things we need to take a look at in this verse. This is the beginning of the new section as we have identified. Nothing Jesus has said previously has even hinted at this. So He's about to. And the word abolish, destroy, it gives on this meaning of an aggressive manner. I'm going to tear it up. I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to leave it nothing but a smoking crater. It's going to be unrecognizable from what it was before. I'm going to destroy. He says, don't think I came to abolish the law and the prophets. As a matter of fact, Jesus came to fulfill. Ephesians 2:15, Jesus made the law of no effect because in His body, did He destroy all or did He fulfill all? In His body, He fulfilled all. And in the back of your mind right now, I want you to be thinking about the account of when Jesus died. The last words that He let out were what? That's significant. That's what Jesus was communicating when He died. Yes, it can apply to that little situation right there where Jesus says, I've done everything I was supposed to do. I'm done. I'm clocking out. Yeah, but it's bigger than that. When Jesus died on the cross, He said, it is finished, because He fulfilled everything He came to fulfill. That's how He made the law and the prophets of no effect. He fulfilled them. He didn't destroy them and leave them a smoking crater. So Jesus says this, and He uses this word abolish because of the reaction they were going to have to what He was about to say. Who can read verse 18 for us? Go ahead. So, Jesus says that it's not... Are the heavens still here? Is the earth still here? Jesus was very plain. Till heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke, jot or tittle will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Well, we discussed about when that happened. Jesus handles the law with great respect. But the truth he is communicating here is, he says it won't pass away until all is accomplished. When will it pass away? When will it pass away? When it is accomplished. Jesus has put an expiration date on when those things would pass away. This is assurance to his hearers, the people he's going to be teaching. He's giving assurance to them. And now, whenever we think, this is how it ends up working out, whenever we think about the law and the prophets passing away, is anybody alarmed at that? If I say the Old Testament is no longer something we are under, it's no longer something that has authority over us, is anybody alarmed by that? No. Nobody here is alarmed by that because we understand, and we understand that we are under the new covenant. Back then, it would have been an alarming thing, and Jesus is trying to give some assurance to them. So we have verse 19. There's an interesting term, and I'm about to read this verse. Whenever you all are reading along, I want to know if you have a different term. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he should be called great in the kingdom of heaven. When I said annul, what word do you all have? Oh, everybody has the word break. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that I made a note there that word needs to be discussed. Annul, break, is better translated relax. It's like if I have my belt on too tight after Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, I see the recognition. Most folks here get it. Aren't we a blessed nation to have that every year? I mean, just as an aside, that's a great thing. That I can use that example, and everyone's like, yep, I get it. That's pretty good. But it's the idea of relaxing one of these commandments. Don't mess with the stuff of God. What is the opinion of someone who messes with God's stuff in the kingdom of heaven? Are they up here or are they down here? That's by this verse, right? In the kingdom of heaven's judgment, they shall be called least if they mess with God's rules. Don't relax those commandments. But one who teaches others, or one who keeps and teaches them, one who keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. This is in God's judgment. Remember, the kingdom of heaven is not always a reference to the church. Oh man, I just got some folks. Okay, we'll discuss it. How long did Jesus' ministry last? About 3 years? Jesus began his ministry by saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That was the beginning. The church wasn't going to happen for some years yet. So Jesus wasn't necessarily talking about the church. When Jesus was teaching the scribe, and the scribe answered Jesus very well, Jesus said to him, you're not far from the kingdom of God. He wasn't talking to him and saying, you're not far from being in the church. Church wasn't there. Church may not even come around while that scribe was alive. He may have died before it happened. The descriptor of the kingdom is one who is under the reign and rule of God. One who is under the reign and rule of God is within the kingdom. God's kingdom not only is in the church, God rules elsewhere too. Where else does God rule? What's one place for certain that God rules? Yeah. Well, not everyone who's up in heaven is in the church. So while the kingdom can indeed refer to the church, and most certainly we are within the kingdom has bounds that are outside of that too. Nowadays, don't mistake. Nowadays, if anybody is in the kingdom, they are in the church. People who are alive and walking around today, if they are in the kingdom, they are in the church. Yes. This was a day and time whenever the kingdom of heaven were those who were under the reign and rule of God. Interestingly enough, this has play in what we're going to talk about today. Because who was reigning and ruling in the Jewish world? Mostly. In this day and time, whenever Jesus came around, who was in charge in the Jewish world? Yeah. Who said that? Yeah. Don't be scared. You're right. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rulers of the Jewish religion were the ones in charge. And they most certainly were ruling. They loved to sit in Moses' seat. Remember that? Yeah, they had placed themselves in a place of ruling. But they were not teaching people how to be in God's kingdom. It was really sad. They were taking people away from the reign and rule of God, and it was the reign and rule of the Pharisees, the Sadducees. And that's not the way it was supposed to be. So Jesus has this thread in here of the judgment of God. How God views things. How those who are under the reign and rule of God view things. This was a reference to the practice of ranking the 613 commandments that the Jews lived by. That's what the Pharisees did. They would rank the 613 commandments into biggies and smallies. What has Jesus made very clear? Those don't exist. The biggies and smallies are not there. They don't exist. If it's a commandment, it's a commandment. There's not, well, you can break this and then keep this and you'll be fine. Remember when Jesus talked about the scribes and Pharisees tithing out their mint, anise, and cumin? But you've neglected justice, mercy, truth. You should have kept these things while not neglecting the other things. There are no biggies and smallies. We're supposed to keep it all. If this is God's commandment, we're supposed to keep God's commandment. That's how Jesus is approaching this. So we're not going to rank, we're not going to relax any of the commandments. That's verse 19. Verse 20, now we find out what Jesus is about to talk about. For I say to you, that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter, there's that phrase again, the kingdom of heaven. You will not have God as your king. You will not be part of His reign and rule unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees. So that is the theme, righteousness. And what's about to happen to the scribes and the Pharisees? Kirk, what happens at work every once in a while? Where's Trevor? Is he in here? What happens at work every once in a while starts with an A And when it starts to come, man alive, everyone is on edge. The nerves are there. Make sure that you know what you're supposed to know. Don't you do something you're not supposed to do. What am I talking about? The audit. That's serious business. The scribes and the Pharisees are about to get audited. It's coming. They're going to be held up and looked at with a microscope. It's going to be crazy. And that's what Jesus is doing. That's what this next section is about. Unless your righteousness surpasses the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you're not going to have God as your king. Oh, okay. I think we all can agree having God as our king is what we want, yes? So we all want our righteousness to surpass the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, don't we? Oh, so this is going to apply to us too. How handy is that? We have contrasts that Jesus is bringing in. We are going to look at the first contrast. The first contrast is about anger. Jesus is going to talk about anger. Anybody ever have anger issues? Anybody ever get mad? Don't you be sitting there, sitting on your hands, because I know everybody in this room at one point or another has gotten mad and said or done something they shouldn't have done. I'm right with you. Anger is a rough thing. Anger is a challenge to living in a Christian way. And Jesus is about to lay this open with this contrast. There are three angles that we're going to look at with the idea of anger. Angle number one is from the outside looking in. Look at verse 22. Matthew 5 and verse 22. Everyone who is angry with his brother. This is a general address. Anyone who is angry. Anyone and everyone. So we're from the outside looking in on this, and Jesus is talking about whoever it is out there in the ether who's mad. Angle number two is from the side of the one whose brother has something against him. Verse 23, note that he uses that phrase. Your brother has something against you. You see it? That's the second angle, from the one whose brother has something against him. Someone's mad at you. And that's how you're supposed to handle it. Angle number three is from the angle of the one who is angry. Verse 25, make friends with your opponent. This is the one who is angry, and we're going to go fight it out in court. And Jesus says, before you get into that, you better put it to bed. Because the end of riding out your anger is not going to be something you want. And we're going to discuss that as well. So Jesus begins in verse 21. You have heard that the ancients were told. Who are the ancients? The old law. Who were the ones who specified in the old law? Jews, specifically. Who were the Jewish teachers of the law? The scribes, the Pharisees. Jesus is pointing the microscope at them. You've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. There's something funny that the Jewish practitioners did. Something kind of odd. And there's a lot of this that we can see in the Old Testament as far as how they kept God's law. But they played some games. That's what I'm going to call it. Whenever I was growing up, if my dad told me, hey, don't do that, and I went and did something kind of like it, but didn't do exactly what he said not to do, I got punished. Why? Because I was playing games. I didn't get to play that game of, well, you know, the letter of the law, Dad. I didn't get to do that. I was smart enough, and he knew I was smart enough to get the gist of what he was saying. So, the Jews played that game a lot. Just as a little aside and a little example of that, the idea of the Sabbath. What was the point of the Sabbath? Okay, that's what it was. It was a day of rest. What were they supposed to do on the Sabbath? What was the intention of the Sabbath? Was it just a vacation day? Oh. The Sabbath was centered around worship. It wasn't just a day off. It wasn't just to prop up your feet and relax. It was, this is God's day. Right? We understand that. That was the intent of the Sabbath. That was how the Sabbath was thrust forward. That's what it was supposed to be. So, in preparation for the Sabbath, they stop working. They prepare beforehand. But one of the games they played was, well, let's nail down exactly what is work. What exactly is work? Well, if you gather sticks for that fire right there, boy, we're going to get you. That's work. It actually happened in the Old Testament. They had all kinds of crazy rules, like you couldn't walk further than a certain distance on the Sabbath. And it became work. Do you know what those cotton pickers did? Instead of allowing that to be a rule that kept the Sabbath sanctified for what it was intended, they would find a location between their place and their friends' places that was within that certain radius of all of them so that they could walk to that place, and they'd party all night. They'd walk out to that place and they'd have a party all night long. Forget the Sabbath and all this worship stuff. We're just going to have us some fun. That's what they did to God's law. They played games. And most assuredly, I promise you, God wasn't happy with how they behaved about the Sabbath. Well, here we have them with this law. You've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Matter of fact, Exodus, 20? Verses 10 through 20. We got the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill is one of those. Okay. But the games they played were, I'm going to get as close as I can to it, and then I'll stop. That's how they lived. Those were the games they played. How many have the rule with their kids, or had the rule with their kids, you don't go in the street? How many had that rule? Okay, you guys had that rule? Did you? He's like, no, I'll put them out there, and they'll learn one way or another. If you had that rule, how many of you had the kids test you? You ever have that? Have the kids test you? They'd go up to the edge of the road, and they'd get as close as they could, and then maybe the toe touch the road and see what happens. That's kind of how the Jews viewed God's law. The Jews of the day, you can get as close as you want to, but don't actually do it. Now, allow that to run rampant just for a second in your mind. Thou shalt not commit adultery. We're all grown-ups. We understand what adultery is. We also understand, without going into too much detail because I don't even want to let my mind go there, but there are all kinds of things you can do that are not right, that are getting close to adultery, that aren't quite adultery. We know about that, right? The Jews would do that. Just so long as I'm not committing the actual act, everything else is okay. That's how they viewed it. This is why Jesus is doing what He's doing. This is why Jesus is teaching what He is teaching. So, you've heard it, the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder. Whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. Fine. Yes. Good. But, verse 22, but I say to you. This is how these contrasts are going to work. But I say to you. This word but, there are two words that are translated but in the Greek language. One is very strong. The word is Allah, and it's a very strong contrast. It takes that first word, that first element of the contrast, and it stomps a hole in it. It leaves it on the ground, completely destroyed, smoking, crater. Forget that and focus on this next thing. There's that contrast, but then there's this Greek word day. And it doesn't do that. It actually links the two. And this is the word that Jesus is using. He says, but I say to you. So he's taking this first part of the law that God did pass down. And this contrast is kind of joined to it, and he says, it goes further than that. Jesus is no longer talking about the physical act. What's He talking about? He's about to talk about the heart. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. Pay attention. Pay attention to what is here. I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. Number one. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing. Anybody have a different translation? You good for nothing? Raka, okay. Shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. Number two. See it? Then number three, and whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. Anybody have something different than you fool? Okay. Do you see the three separate elements there? Do you see them? In verse 22, there are three progressing steps of anger that Jesus shows here. If you explore a little bit of the culture, how they thought about things, how they expressed themselves back in that day, there are three levels here. You begin just by seething anger. Look what he says. Whoever is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. So if we have the seething anger, I've been guilty of that. Most definitely. Whoever has this seething anger, Jesus says, that's wrong. You'll be guilty before the court. Next thing he says is, and whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, or reka, or raka, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. Jesus is talking about the Sanhedrin. You remember that group that they gathered around him? They persecuted him right before he died? That's the ones. Jesus is talking about the Supreme Court. You'll be guilty before the Supreme Court. How serious is God about anger? Just got to get that in there. Anger is serious. How many people have had their lives touched by anger? Whew. How many people have done damage to their lives by anger? How many people have done damage to other people's lives by anger? Counselor, how many people have problems dealing with anger? They keep her employed. God's very serious about anger, and it's a very common problem. Well, this idea of you good for nothing is the anger spilling out into harsh language and angry words. That's the level that he's talking about in that Jewish mindset. So it's wrong just to sit on it and be mad. It's not right. Can't deal with it that way. Jesus says, I guarantee you there are some folks that you all have seen who have allowed their anger to spill out into angry words. And Jesus says, that is wrong. Who was the Maury Povich guy? Lie detector test determined that was a lie. Well, Jesus is doing that here. He goes, right here, this litmus test says that's wrong. Matter of fact, God says this is wrong too. So we have these two levels of anger that are spilling out. What's next? Like, you would think that would be enough. Seething anger, anger spilling out into angry words. Whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. Now, it is not necessarily the term of you fool that is going to condemn somebody to hell. Remember, there are no biggies and smallies here. You can't say this magical phrase and call someone a fool and automatically condemn yourself to hell. That's not what Jesus is saying. In the Jewish world, that phrase, you fool, one, that was something that only God said. But two, that would have been the level of anger where you have completely lost control. An apoplectic eruption. You are a volcano of seething rage and hatred, and it has boiled over. There is no controlling it. How many times do we see that? How many times have we heard somebody try to excuse that behavior? They get mad and absolutely lose their mind, and what do they say? Well, they shouldn't have made me mad. That. Where someone completely loses it. Jesus condemns that. He condemns all three. The interesting thing is, it's not just the act of murder. Do you see? It's not just I can get as close as I want to, and I'm okay just as long as I don't cross over that line. As long as I don't put my foot in the street. Jesus says it's not that way. And he addresses the heart of the issue. And he's talking about how evil and how damaging anger is, and he hits all three of these. Verse 23. Anybody have a comment or a question before we go to verse 23? Okay. Verse 23, therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you. This is angle number 2. First angle, outside looking in, looking at anger objectively, we see this as a problem. Jesus then jumps off of that and says, therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, this is someone who has somebody else angry at them. What has lost the ultimate priority here in this verse? There are some things that folks think just hold absolute priority. What's the topic of this verse here that Jesus is talking about? What is the person doing? What are they doing whenever he tells them, go make it right with your brother? No, what are they interrupting? Really? Have you ever seen someone in the church who has a problem? There's a conflict going on, and there's a couple of brethren, or a couple of sisters even, and they're kind of getting after it. Well, look here, when you said this and you said that, that wasn't right. And then the bell rings and they go, oh, we got to go to worship. We better just... Have you seen it? I have seen it firsthand. What is Jesus prioritizing here first, even over worship? This is a sinful thing, and it can't be allowed to continue. And you know what? You don't even have to be the guilty party. If you know your brother has something against you, someone's mad at you, Jesus says, God doesn't want your offering. He doesn't want you worshiping Him. He wants you to go and make it right. Go and make it right. That's what He says here, and that's one of the reasons in Matthew 5:9, peacemakers are so well looked upon. It's not just quashing the conflict. It's not just making all parties go away and drop it. It's making all parties unified again. That's what's supposed to happen in this scenario. Verse 24, he says, leave your offering before the altar. Be reconciled to your brother. Come and present your offering. Verse 25, make friends quickly. Angle number 3. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you are with him on the way, so that your opponent may not hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. There are certain repercussions when people follow their anger. How many people have seen it? We've all seen. Anybody ever watch that show Cops? We've all seen what happens when people follow their anger. When people allow their anger just to go out of control, unchecked. And Jesus gives an illustration of it here. Did you know? I mean, if we were all going to go to the police station from here after worship, there are enough different streets and enough different ways. We could probably get there without seeing one another till we get within like a block of the place. We could pull that off. Back then, that wasn't going to happen. Back then, roads were scarce enough. You were probably going to run into your opponent on the way to court. And Jesus says to the one who's angry, the one who's wanting to go duke it out in court, the one who's wanting to go and fight, the one who's so ate up about it, He says, when you see your opponent on the way to court, you stop it. You make friends with them before you even get there. Why? And this is the ultimate end of the discussion of anger and why Jesus is hitting on it so hard. Why? What is the reason in that verse? Yes. The consequences that will come from your anger are not something you want to deal with. It's not something you want to have to swallow. You don't want to get pasted with that. Because Jesus says it will happen. You see that? You will go into prison. So the message for this first contrast of the heart that Jesus is making is very simple. Control your anger. Thank you for your time and attention. We are out of time, probably have about 30 seconds left. Good comments in class today. Thank you much.